Hello and welcome to a banlist discussion video. So Bandai recently have announced that they're releasing a restriction list. So they announced this ban list effective that will be effective November 17th, which will affect the European Euros format. However, it will also affect the Nationals format in NA. But for NA, they'll be playing under EX5, whereas for Europe, we'll be playing under BT14. And to talk about
Yeah.
it, I brought on one of my testing partners. Tom, what's up?
Hey YouTube, how you doing?
All right, and yeah, we play a lot of Digimon. We've been testing. We've mostly been prioritizing 13, but we definitely have our eye on
I mean,
14.
to be fair to us as well, it's kind of weird because Europe is the only region playing BT14 Nationals, which is like a very strange way that they did the divider. Normally,
Yes,
Europe has often had some of our events later than other regions, but we are every other Western region, so like South America and Oceania are both getting their Nats in EX5, I believe.
yeah,
So
it's very annoying.
nothing is as late as like February though. Everything will be done nationals wise in January.
Yeah, it's just mostly annoying because once again, Bandai just decided that Bandai does not like the UK, and it's now
Yeah,
the second time that we're getting a list
back
as
to back,
back to
like back
back,
to back regionals, the biggest two regionals of the whole year in the UK,
and
and
we're
back to
getting a
back,
list.
the ban list is day before.
Yep. However, this time I think we do have confirmation that the list will not be affecting the event that's happening because that event will be under BT13 because it will be the last event for BT13. So the list will not be affecting the format. It's more for our for our Euros format slash Nats equivalent for Europe where we'll be playing in the 14. So, um, we can go through like Twitter takes later, but we're gonna quickly go into
There are some takes
there are
today
some
as well.
takes.
It's been like I want to say we're probably filming this like 7 hours after it got announced because
Yeah,
bullshit. But like it has, there have been takes today on
yeah. So this is a
Twitter.
very rough tier list. This is not what we think the format is going to be like. This is just I watched a bunch of videos. I've been keeping up with the format. I backtracked to like a bunch of East things, and I just kind of put things into place where they might end up being, just so it's easier for you, the viewer at home, to visualize what we're talking about when we talk about these cards and like why we think Bandai might do something about the deck or a card or might not basically.
And we can even like as we discuss the cards that we think and like that we discuss with other people what we think might get hit, that like maybe that affects something. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a card, let's say that they hit something in Shine Greymon, for example, maybe that moves it down a little bit. We can talk about what that means, but like this
Absolutely.
is kind of just for reference.
So before we actually talk about the restriction list, there's a couple of things that we need to go over when we talk about like this balance. The first one is that if you think about it, Bandai not only, but they generally tend to release lists for even number sets. So we had a list in BT8, we had the list in BT10. Well, in BT8 they shot like yellow hybrid and blue hybrid. In BT10 they got rid of like cross art. In 12 it was the Metal Greymon virus and the OTK
Or the
decks.
Greymon Virus X, yeah.
Yeah, and the OTK decks as well as Blossom. So it looks like Bandai is trying to do like lists every like even format or so, like every even number of the set release. So like 8, 10, 12. For us, it'll be 14, right?
And then they also like to like it kind of helps to think about it in terms of the number of cards that is. So it's like, let's say between BT12, when the most recent ban list as of the time of recording was June 1st. It went into effect on June 1st. So that was
Yep.
BT12. Then we got EX4, BT13, and we're going into 15. Sorry, 14. But we also had starter decks go out.
Yep.
So they like released these ban lists on, like, people are like, oh, ban list when? It's like, no, you can kind of feel it out. Like, it's coming, and I think people know that at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
once you've had your Bandai injection of one BT set, one EX set, and some starters, that's usually when they start looking at stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's just because the way that the game works, that we know that they generally try to not hit SRs unless it's for something like Ultima Cup. So that's something that we
Yep.
can probably predict, is that they will not be hitting super rares. And so we then have to look at, okay, if they're not hitting the super rare, what card in that deck are they more likely to hit that would like tone that deck down? And also Digimon is a game where they Bandai likes to let decks like breathe, and they don't tend to hit them super preemptively unless the deck is very problematic.
Yeah.
So, for
The only
example,
the only one that jumps out to mind in the West was Cross Art. That's like the
yes,
big example that everybody talks about.
yeah, the deck that almost killed the game, I guess. So
Yeah.
Bandai wanted to keep our English format very healthy, so they preemptively hit Crossheart. But that's a discussion for another day. And so then we have to think about like how far into the future is Bandai willing to look into when they want to hit a card, right? So if we have a list that's looking to sort of reset the format in going into BT14 because we'll have a new mechanic with the aces, and we're also getting a lot of promos imported and
Mhm.
the training. So this is basically like you can look at it as like a new season for the game.
This
Uh,
is also this is the start of the new block too. So
yes.
it hasn't mattered as much in the West because
Mm-hmm.
we don't follow those format restrictions. But for a lot of the folks I follow over who play in I got some people I follow on Twitter who are like playing in Indonesian or Japanese 3v3 events. The new Tamer Party events are coming out soon. Those are restricted by blocks for the first time. So a lot of these cards are like pretty significant hits in terms of like, oh well, you know, they need to be touched up now because when they get to the 3v3 format, like things get changed around. So
Mm-hmm.
they have to treat things differently like that.
Yeah. And
And
so
you said earlier as well. It's like how far do they look ahead? It's like we kind of like we've never had it officially confirmed. That's like how many sets ahead they are or anything like that.
yes.
There was the whole like it was kind of a meme, but like you know folks actually do know that there was a new design team that started picking up on Digimon after BT13. And so I think it's really interesting because like one of the things that we can start seeing is in the previous ban list, there were a couple of cards that got hit that they talk about were in their own words.
They
In,
restricted future game
they,
design.
yeah, they restricted future game design, so they weren't like, for example, like I
The
think
OTK decks, I think, are the ones that jump to mind, right?
yeah, but I want to say I don't want to quote this wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're like they even said this is crazy by the way. They were like promo where Garurumon, so promo '08 where
Oh,
Garurumon,
I
the
think I
Tier
actually
8
have
type
that
one.
booted
Yeah,
up
if you want
here.
to pull
Give
it
me a
up,
sec.
the actual quote that they have is pretty crazy, and they say it's like it currently doesn't have extreme power.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, which is
but this
pretty
card
wild.
limits future
I remember,
design.
I think by that point, I don't remember where in the Midwest it was, but there was a U.S. Midwestern regional
Mm-hmm.
in NA that like that Melga had just like outright blown out of the water. I was like, it currently isn't super strong. It's like, okay,
But
sure.
it could be, and we
But
now know that this is most likely because they knew that they were making more Garurumon
yeah,
support with
EX5 is coming out, so the
between
time
the
between
starter decks EX5 and
yeah,
BT15, right?
so yeah, so that kind of gives us like a little bit of an indicator that like uh, because in Japan, or excuse me, in the Eastern format, there was a terrible 14-day window where starter deck 16 and the promo were legal at the same
Yes,
time.
Japan finally got a taste of the
Yeah, it was
Garuru.
just awful. It was a nightmare. Um, so that deck was insane. But like we know from that like the difference between the ban list going into effect in June, which was later in June for the Eastern players than us,
Yep.
which was a first if I remember, um, means that like they're roughly looking at like 6 or 7 months apart, which is kind of what you were saying before about like you know how they hit on these even numbered BT sets.
Yep.
That's roughly how many cards they are ahead in the design. It looks like.
Yeah, and so
So,
I think when this list, my guess is that Bandai is going to look at the upcoming formats, which are going to be BT14 and EX5, and they're so BT14 drops November, and then 15 drops in mid February, right?
yeah, February like 16th or
So this is
14th.
like
It's like right after Valentine's Day.
this is a 4.5 month period for where we'll experience BT14 and EX5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think Bandai. I think they'll limit some cards that hit the decks for EX5 because I think EX5 is like very much like its own format, and uh, that's what I think Bandai is like looking into is like, okay, we're going to hit decks that could maybe be problematic up until EX5 while still keeping everything like nice and clean. But I don't think they'll look at specifically Pokemon, and I think a Pokemon is, again, it's a topic for another day. There are a
Yeah,
couple of cards.
people have seen a Pokemon. You
Yeah,
don't
there are a
Twitter.
couple of cards that you can hit that will hit a Pokemon, but I don't think we should be expecting this balanced to cover BT15, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the other component of what makes this ban list timing interesting is that, like, just like we were saying before about like kind of the rough amount of time that they spend between these ban lists
Mm-hmm.
dropping, um, BT15 in the West is going to release almost to the T with the same amount of time between it and a following starter deck. So we're gonna get BT15 just like BT11 did, where it comes out at the start of the spring, and then there will be a starter deck, in this case another advanced deck with I think it's
Oh,
Terriermon.
the Terramon stuff, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there will be a ban list around the lifespan of BT15. And if I was a betting guy, I'd probably say somewhere in April because that's when they hit Greymon X.
Yep.
So it's like we'll probably get like this ban list will go up to probably half of BT15's life, and then it'll fizzle out after that.
Yeah.
Like they'll go on to the next stuff.
All right, so let's get onto the actual ban list discussion. So again, going back to this tier, we basically just threw a bunch of decks, put them into where we roughly think they might be. Don't take this super seriously. It's just so we're expecting that like for BT14, right? This is like a BT14. We could do a tier list for EX5, but
Yeah,
EX5.
but I think the thing about like how we're gonna move some of these pieces around as well, like once we start talking about what the effects some of these ideas that we have
Mm-hmm.
will have on these decks, like it's tough because people like to draw the comparison to like, oh, how did they do in Japan? It's like, well, Japan's BT14, it was a crazy different format to what
Oh,
we're getting.
absolutely.
So different. Um, they got two distinct full waves of product releases that we're not
Yeah,
gonna get.
they basically their BT14 had like multiple waves where like oh well no it was more than 13. Their 13 had a bunch of different
13, you're right. 13 had a bunch of different arcs, but like even 14 had like
the limited pack.
Yeah, limited pack 1 came out, gave
Mm-hmm.
Gamamon became a real deck that people have to respect.
So
Quartzmon got put back on the map because of what is that called, Quantumon?
oh yeah, the
It's either
Quantumon, yeah.
Quantumon or Quantumon.
Yeah, Quantumon
Um,
definitely like changed the way that like blue. It doesn't change the way Bloom is
it also
built.
brought Yellow Hybrid back. Like
Yes.
for a little bit, like Marcus bottom end Yellow Hybrid with Quantumon was like a real
Mm-hmm.
deck.
And
And it
so
mattered.
yeah,
And
so
it's
for
molded
EX5,
Anubis. So
yeah, with EX5, I think like when you look at EX5, it's going to be like purple dominated, and there's definitely like again,
yeah.
I could do a EX5 tier list where we could go more in depth about those decks. This is just a visual because I think the cards for Europe. I'm doing this ban list with the idea that like they're looking to stabilize 14 and then just let EX5 happen.
Yeah, it's they're not throwing 14 under the bus to fix 15, but they're also not letting 15 go unchecked. Like 15 as it was in Japan, sorry,
EX5.
EX5, thank you. EX5 is they're trying to stabilize BT14 and letting EX5 happen. And the way it was in Japan was that it was purple decks and the things that could enter the various flavors of purple decks.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned Yellow Hybrid did really well. Yellow Hybrid has a great Anubismon matchup, so it was just kind of a natural buddy to that format.
Yeah.
But there are other things that will pop up. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about here are like both aware that the purple decks are going to end up being really good once we get EX5. These are also changes that will matter before we get to EX5.
Yeah.
Because like BT14 is a format that they expect people to compete for worlds for.
Absolutely. So we're gonna go. This is just like you can see like some cards here, but we'll talk about like each individual card and why we think they might do something about it, or why we think they should do something about it. Realistically, I don't think the most cards we've ever gotten on a ban list were like what 4 cards.
Yeah, 4 or 5 cards tops.
It
But
was
those are even more weird because those were on staggered ban lists. So
yeah.
it was like starting BT7, then BT8, then blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That was like back in BT6 or something.
We'll see how we'll see what ban ends up doing. I'm expecting them to hit like maybe 4 cards again. I think that's like a reasonable amount.
Yeah, we're kind of calling a lot of shots here, but I would be pretty. I think there's a good few, like maybe like there are 2 or 3 on here that I think a lot of folks you'll see a lot of that are more frequently suggested, and I think they'll probably make up the bulk of what the ban list is. I don't think we're getting a 1 card ban list this time. I would be very surprised, because that was like kind of a meme. But also it's like there's just a lot, like BT13 is like, yeah, you know, people like to talk about like, oh, wide formats versus tier 0 formats. So BT13 in both Japan and the West was a very weird wide format.
It was a very diverse format, which some people really like, some people.
But the last time we had one of those, they ended up going kind of crazy with the ban list. So I would expect them to hit a couple different things.
Just to kind of like make the format a bit more focused, and then that way.
Like, yeah, let's the narrative also kind of be there for nationals too. Like it spoilers for some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in a minute, but like it does kind of look like some of the cards that they're printing in BT14 and EX5 look like they are extremely well positioned to just be the best deck of their own format without like drowning each other out, which I think is interesting.
So, card number 1, BT12 Marcus. This guy's a bit problematic.
Yeah, everybody's also already heard everything about Marcus. It's silly that it costs nothing to do his thing. Like the opportunity cost is non-existent because like there's no scenario where your deck doesn't produce these things for free and protect them when they get damaged. Like it's kind of the like easiest version of tame or good stuff that they've ever made.
Yeah. I think the problem
is you.
I think the problem with Marcus is that Marcus was designed. I think Marcus would have benefited from being a card that you could only have like one active Marcus on the field. Like my problem with Marcus is that when you have multiples and like the deck high rolls you, it feels like you can't come back from. But if you could only have one Marcus at a given time, then I think the deck would be a much more interesting like tempo deck, where it does its thing and then it asks you to respond, and then it would have played in a way not exactly like Lorna, where like you make a bunch of bodies, but like it pressures your opponent and like makes the opponent like want to play the game, right?
Mm-hmm. It's also really interesting because it's like Marcus also represented like we've had hybrids for years now, but like this is the first time that Tamer aggression took place on a Tamer card.
Yep.
And so like it had interesting ramifications, whereas like a lot of the effective value of purple was in level based deletion. So Marcus having no level means that there are like consequences to his like high strength, and we'll talk about this sort of stuff later, but like it has led to like interesting changes in the format where like because Marcus was so good and you could make so many, that a lot of purple's tools to answering a ton of things at the same time just were not effective.
No.
Because these aren't leveled Digimon.
No, they're just guys.
Yeah, they're just free guys that turn back into safe tamers at the end of every turn. So a lot of the decks that played this like interesting back and forth on the board just had no answer.
Yeah, and so like even
it's very safe and very uninteractive.
And you think like a deck like Black Geogreymon would be like the easy counter because you get to delete tamers, but then the deck also has like a safety net in just putting those tamers back into your security. So then not only do you need to delete the Marcus, but then you need to burn the Marcus to actually get rid of it.
Yep.
And the other problem with the deck is I think it's a deck that randomly high rolls you and it feels unfair. And so there's no like real good way to balance it other to just limit Marcus. I think the deck is still like viable because changing the kinds of cards that you have to play, where you have to play cards that enable Marcus versus just having the Marcus be there, is more interesting. Like the BT13 support, I think, is very good support. It's very well designed because it's basically like ships and pilots, right?
I'll give you. I think most of the cards are really well designed, and then there's like one outlier. I think you'll probably see this. I'll be transparent for YouTube so I don't get roasted later. But I do play a lot of red decks, so I will give myself the out on that one for all the glue eaters that hate that. But I will say there is there's like an interesting, like you brought it up before. It's like why can they all play? Why are they able to play these Marcuses kind of infinitely when they already have one in play, right? Like all the other Tamer free play restrictions were kind of set that way, and it feels like they knew that because if you want to pull up really quick the Geogreymon from the Rise Greymon from BT12, or if you just search Rise Greymon, I'll show you the thing. So Rise Greymon has had like this is like one of the Digimon of all time in card game, by the way. Right. He's 13. We're gonna get back to him.
Oh, you mean the 12?
Go to 12. Yeah, I think the 12 is like the first attempt that they made that is strictly speaking the balanced one, right? Because this is agree. If you have the Marcus that you got for free either with either of the Geogreymons, because they were both balanced around this idea that you would go Agumon into a Greymon, pay the memory, and then you'd get the free results. This card does not produce another Marcus. It just correctly benefits you and basically makes the Marcus free when you went into this guy on the evolve.
And also and then it helps the Marcus like cheat out its 3 memories. It's like they're working together.
Exactly. Yeah. So this felt like they were like, when you get your one Marcus down and start doing your Evo line for zeros, this is how you make it like a worthwhile exchange. And then they blew that out of the water with BT13 Rise Greymon.
Yeah,
BT13 Rise Greymon is like if
an abomination.
This card is so it gets away with murder because it's not Marcus Damon, and like everyone just wants to neuter this deck and take away Marcus, which I think fair enough. It's been very good, and it does, like I said earlier, do a lot of really unfair stuff, and Sometimes color matchup flavor can be really cool in Digimon, but Marcus is not one of those examples.
No.
Um,
Marcus needs to go.
Yeah, Marcus needs to go. But when they eventually come back to shine, I want people to sort of be aware of like Geogreymon is not that BT13 Geogreymon.
The Geogrey or the Rise?
Yeah, sorry, the Rise. My bad. Yeah, the BT13 Rise Greymon was eventually also part of the reason this just became so.
Yeah.
Like your Geogreymon would play Marcus from hand or from security. Then you'd evolve. Then you'd get another Marcus, and then that Marcus would give you back a memory. And
it was just too much advantage.
Yeah, and it became so much for free that it was like, why did they ever bother with the BT12 one if they were going to rub it out of the water?
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that like Marcus cannot exist in like multiples. I think like one Marcus is like probably fine because you have to run enablers.
Yeah, the game plays totally differently when there's more than one of this thing in play.
Yeah,
like there's no amount of one memory.
It's too fast.
You would just always pay the one memory.
Yep. Next card.
Well, hang on. I have a thing.
You have the thing.
I have a thing.
All right. Okay.
I think it's time.
You think it's time?
I think it's time that we have a good. There's a couple cards on here.
Okay.
But I think it's time that we talk about all the one-ofs in the Digimon band.
I think the hidden potential. We're going to talk about like hidden potential as like its own card, but I think this is also this as like every single one of that's currently in the game.
Yep, that's
like pretty much like 80% of them. There's like a couple of them that I don't mind that they're one-ofs, but most of the one-ofs should go, and I think it's probably because Bandai doesn't want you to feel bad about investing into the game when they hit cards, because at least you can play the one, right? That's like playing one is better than playing none. But then it makes decks just have like weird sack factor where like, oh, I randomly go high rolled, and this is not how the deck like performs. And so sometimes people have like breakout performances because you don't know like that person's matchups, but like somebody could just have like a really good day on, for example, Bloom Lord, where they see HPD like.
If you draw HPD 6 times in 9 rounds, you feel really good.
Yeah, probably more with the new support, right?
Yeah, there's so much card draw in that deck now.
Yeah,
because the searchers just thin through things so fast. I saw a Bloom Lord the other day. I was testing on the simulator. Shout out to the new simulator.
The new simulator.
And I got a game with a Bloom Lord. It drew their whole deck back again.
Yeah, that's common now.
The bottom card.
That's common now.
Yeah, that's a thing they do.
Yeah. And I am part of the problem,
longer,
by the way.
This is no longer hidden potential, though. This is hella discovered potential.
Yeah, this is aware potential.
We are cognizant. We are downright aware.
We are very aware. So yeah, I don't think Bandai will ever just get rid of like Ice Wall and Reinforce and all these like problematic one-ofs.
Which would be nice, but
would be nice.
It is.
They're getting somewhat better about it in Ultimate Cup. I think Ultimate Cup as a side format, it lets them sort of like explore ban lists without having to like sort of like put a stamp on approval on it, but like this is how the game's going. They get to basically, it's like a trial where they can go, okay, we want to, set these decks back a little bit. We'll try to see if doing this helps the deck or not. And we see that, like, for example, in the case of Bloom Lord, the deck is still very much like alive in Ultimate Cup format, but with one Hydra, no HPD, limited level 5s. It doesn't just like win everything. It's very strong, but it's not as oppressive, right?
Yeah, it sees a few places in top 32s and top 16s, but
and the occasional top 8, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But so yeah, I think HPD is like it's too strong. It does too much, and if they want Bloom or Green to be sort of like a viable strategy, they need to sort of like let the cards, like let the decks sort of have its own power as opposed to just having a high roll, which is not representative of how the deck plays like every single time, right?
We've also spent a really long time where, and I know this sucks for you because you are a green player.
Yeah.
But like there has kind of been one green deck for like Grandis
since
got hit back in
since EX3.
Yeah, but Grandis didn't really particularly have a great BT11 despite what we were all kind of expecting. So the little bit of extra time we thought Grandis was going to have after Alphamon got hit really didn't come to pass. Without the Alphamons around, and like, even BWG was not like, it wasn't enough to make Grandis the guy.
Even in like 12, theoretically, you could talk about how like if the promo Grandis wasn't hit, like Grandis could maybe have a place in the format because of Quartz, like Quartz letting the deck sort of be a very efficient single stack deck that turbos off Quartz would give you like a good Hunters matchup, and the card would theoretically like let the deck play. But in reality, like, why Quartz when you can kill people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you play a fantastic 2-turn kill when you play the third best OTK?
Yeah, and
And
so
that was enough for that deck for a really long time.
yeah,
But
like
that's kind of like that. Is it like because that deck was sort of it didn't make the splash, it got restricted, which I'm not here to discuss whether or not
no,
it
no,
deserved the
absolutely.
restriction, but like
Bloom basically
uh
had to carry the whole
yeah,
color.
yeah, Bloom is the green deck right now. Like
Yeah,
it's so that we've lived for a long while now in this world where HBD has been a tool that sacks you in Bloom Lord, which
yep.
it is. I'm not
It
gonna
takes
pretend
away
it's
like a
not.
lot of like the merit out of Bloom.
Yeah, but this is one of those cards where it's like it does restrict the design space, and it's also a lot easier to find it in decks that are coming out. Like
Where they
we were talking
draw.
about before we were recording. It's like the Leomon stuff draws a lot of cards,
Yep.
and they have a great time with this.
Any deck that just draws and evos a bunch of time and cycles through their deck will
Mhm.
come across the HPD in the best of three.
Bugs bugs love being sideways. This is basically all upside for bugs in a way that is so much more than we thought they would be in like BT15.
Yeah,
So
Bugs
like
can maybe like
bugs
even
can
like
kind of play
Diarbit,
into
like a deck that you would
yeah.
think that deck that like has this like fantasy of like you're dueling with your stack, you're attacking and
Mhm.
defending well, and you have like an end of turn unsuspend and an end of turn proc. Well, doesn't really matter when you just go HPD and like you just go up like
Yeah, HBD
free
courts on
memory.
top of your Dire
Every
Rabbit.
like hidden potential turns every deck into like an Oryukin.
Yeah.
So HPD needs to go, and that's like pretty much all needs to be said. Now, I think
And
this is
we would be talking about other like to be clear because we mentioned this is also somewhat of a stand-in for all the other one-ofs.
oh yeah,
We
I'll do
would
it.
be talking about the other one-ofs if they had had the year that Bloom Lord has had. But
Absolutely.
Bloom has just been that guy for 12 months,
If there was
and
like a
so
blue deck that had like a good performance, like I think like after Melga,
yeah,
what did blue really have?
yeah, like Blue Flare did not end up keeping the train going.
Yeah, they got blue flare. Imperial kind of
There was the
tried.
Kuzaha hype for a month. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, so then like decks I would normally play Ice Wall, like they're still decent, but they're not like super crazy.
Yeah.
Yellow is
Whereas
basically like kind of waiting for like to get its new tools in 14 and EX5, so then it can actually like I think
yeah, it
like the
can
new
pop off.
design team kind of understood yellow a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
yellow might have like a place in the future.
Yep,
And
I
there's a
agree.
couple of other ones, but yeah, um,
Anyway, that's HBD. We've
that's
talked about it
HBD.
10 minutes.
Now, I think this is a card that I think we in our like test group, I think this is a card that I would be very sad if I don't see on the ban list.
Yeah, I'll try and do like a 2 second summary here, but we've talked about we mentioned at the start that they're kind of in an interesting position with releasing this ban list
Mm-hmm.
right as the BT13 format comes to an end, where and there are a few cards on this ban list or on the screen here that we'll talk about in a second that fall under a similar situation to Analog Youth, but Analog Youth still even then has something else going to it, which is that uh, they are going to have to make hits to decks who do not have their crazy cards yet.
Yep.
So there will be tools that get added to decks that are currently going to like Analog Youth that will get their new tools, and Analog Youth is just too much. So
It's
when
too
they
much.
take it away, they'll still keep their good stuff, but like
The yeah, I
yeah,
think
the
Analog
timing
Youth
worked out weird.
was it's a very weird card because it was a card that came out at a point where there wasn't really like a good deck to use it, and then it just kind of went under the radar, and now it seems like everybody's using it.
Well, there was MDF.
And yes, I
But
suppose there was MDF.
what a legacy, right? Is like
Yeah,
MDF into EX5.
yeah, or EX1, right?
Yeah, EX1 too, but I'm saying like
Oh,
in terms
sure.
of like the formats where Analog Youth is just completely warped. Spoilers for folks who haven't kept up with the Western format. Analog Youth is the guy. Like AG is great, but Analog Youth does things to Lugermon that just absolutely takes it out of control.
Mm-hmm. And I think we can like
Um,
talk about like so if we go back to the ban list, right? Like there's like a couple of decks here where like analog it's primarily Lugamon where like analog is like problematic if you're exclusively looking at BT14. This is the Lugamon is the deck that like single-handedly breaks analog youth the most,
yep.
just
But
because
there are plenty of other decks that do
yes.
that
And
in
so
Japan.
if you don't want to hit Lugamon before it even comes out, but you want to hit some of its consistency and some of its like degeneracy or like some of its unfairness, because the deck, when you look at it, the deck when it does its turn, it's really really powerful, but if you squint a little bit harder, it's just a BT9 deck.
Yep. And there are like
There's
I
no
just wanted to
counterplay.
triple check. Yeah, I wanted to triple check and just make sure that we weren't being like fully hyperbolic with this. If you just check like results from EX5 and BT14,
Hmm.
there's everything from like Anubis plus the Garurumon good stuff. Gallenmon has tops with this. Gamamon loves this card, and the LM1 cards made Gamamon a real big threat. Lugamon, obviously, like we said, but this even started to see success, like kind of warping the power of the Devas. Like,
Yep.
oh, all my level 5s that can blast evolve suddenly turn into free level 5 stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it got advantageous kind of out of hand, and Analog Youth represents like,
And even I think this is one of those cards where like if the list is coming Alpha 14 and it wants to keep 14 and 15 in check in EX5 in check, and Analog Youth is just like every purple deck, majority of purple decks will use it. And even if you wanted to, we're not super looking into 15, right? But like Apocalypse, this is like another card that just,
yeah, that still sees some use in Apocalypse today.
yeah. And so I think it's like Analog Youth kind of needs to go, because I think decks should have their own like unique searchers, as opposed to just like a generic 2 cost like Cool Boy esque card that then also has like defensive capabilities, and it lets loop decks loop harder.
Yeah, the no off turn is also just ridiculous.
Yes,
Like that
it's
is
like every
some
deck has
power
Mimi,
color defined. Yeah, like every deck has half a Mimi, and that is enough.
and then like the card is also, it's very similar to Marcus, where the card is like super problematic in multiples, because like the first,
You know we'd see this card in Shine too. Like that's the thing is if it wasn't for how good like some of the ruin mode stuff was for a little while, where it was
yeah,
like ruin mode keep you on your off turns or help you skip your off turns, like that effect alone should tell you how powerful that card is because you just don't drop your tempo.
no,
Um,
yeah,
but
but the
here
card
he
is like
is,
super problematic in multiples.
a two cost white tamer card.
Yep.
Where have we seen that before?
Mm-hmm. And so I think Analog, it needs to go like it between like the dog decks and the Lugamon decks and the Pokemon. I think this is a card where all 3 of those decks play this one card, and it should tell you something, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for just how good like in Lugamon especially is one of those decks where like it's going to see play. It's kind of unique actually. It's the BT14 deck that I would currently rank the highest of of EX5 power.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are other good ones, like we're gonna get to some of those in a little minute. But
But
like of the
Lugamon,
new archetypes, yeah, like Lugamon just gets a ton of good quality
and
cards.
some of it is to do with the fact that like we as a region, like the West, we can look at Japan and we can sort of like pick up where they left off. So we know that Lugamon's good, and we can continue refining the deck. Whereas like Japan, some of it is Japan's new toy syndrome, where they sort of like drop decks for new decks very quickly. The
Yeah.
West, we know that like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if it's broken, keep playing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so we can sort of like again pick up where they left off, and we can just sort of like continue to optimize Lugamon into be like that BT9 deck that I was talking about, where it just like kills your opponent can't interact, it loops, it goes through its entire deck,
And
uh
always finds whatever pieces
it
you were missing.
it finds the pieces. It doesn't have to interact with you, and unless you show it some kind of threat, you just lose.
Yep. And I think there will be people that will see the Analog Youth as kind of like a scapegoat for this, but I want to talk a little bit briefly about like some of the sentiment, because I have a lot of folks that I know about like the big 4 of BT14, which was Hellugar, the level 5,
Yep.
which is like if people haven't looked at that card, it's
That card
insane.
is pretty crazy.
But it was one of the main reasons that Analog Youth is such a good enabler in this
Mhm.
archetype, is because like pop the Hellugar by its own effect, gain all the memory, recycle everything else, and then the pieces that you were putting in the trash via the Analog Youth just broke everything. So
Yep.
it is almost nothing but upside. And instead of like where Japan wanted to hit Hellugar, I think it makes more sense for us to see Analog Youth.
To Analog Youth, yeah.
Because Hellugar could become defined power budget, and then there's also something to be said for the fact that it's still at least getting one more wave of support in the near future.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah.
of
The red.
16.
Yeah.
And BT15. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
you got
the-
cards in BT15.
Yep.
But it's also very like if you have kept up with Digimon Seekers, like it's pretty much guaranteed to be getting support in BT16 as well.
Even if it's like
So-
a couple of cards, yeah.
Yeah, so Analog Youth feels like the safer bet, and it will
Mhm.
accomplish more at making EX5 kind of less volatile.
And I think before we go into Deftlinger, this ties back to what we said about we are okay with decks having a good lifespan. Like it's fine for Lugamon to be. If you think about like a good example of this is Alphamon. How Alphamon came out in BT7, it was like a tempo deck. Came out in BT8, it was sort of like a control deck that like it gave you some unsuspense. So like there were some ways to sort of like do what it wanted to do with like restanding and doing a decent amount of checks and play sort of like tempo, and it had all these tools. And then BT9, obviously, like it was the monster deck that it was. But this was a deck that sort of like evolved over 3 different formats and did something different. But when you look at its final, like when you look at like BT9 Alphamon, it was just so much better than anything else. And even now, like if you give Alphamon its cards, it would be immediately like a pretty good deck.
There are events that ran that. I always think that's really funny. It's been a while since I think anybody experimented with that format. But right as BT11 ended in Japan, I remember seeing like one of the larger locals I'm aware of was like it had like a bunch of folks sharing posts online.
Yeah.
Which was that they ran like a no ban list event, and the top 2 were Yellow Hybrid, which like fatigued everybody, and Alphamon, which OTK'd everybody.
Yep.
And then Alphamon won because it has Congo.
Yep.
So it's like the no ban list format comes down to Alphamon just has one more tool.
Yep.
And that's
usually how it goes.
Definitely lived its life. Definitely lived its lifestyle.
So yeah, it's what we're saying. Because of Seekers, because of the Digimon Seekers storyline taking place, we're expecting Lugamon to still get stuff, and so we want the deck to kind of be playable, but we don't want to take its like ability to like walk, right? We want to make
sure. Hellugar is still crazy.
It's still a very crazy card.
But like I think this gives it a more fair chance to stand on its own legs. Like,
yeah.
It would be its Alphamon probably would have also been absolutely nuts if it came out and already had the Cool Boy package, but because it got that at the end of its crazy power spike, that was like the thing. And so this feels like Lugarmon is coming out just in time to it's like its Cool Boy is already waiting for it, which feels like that's why broadly this makes more sense.
So Deathslinger. So the only reason I really highlighted Deathslinger is because it's on the Ultimate Cup on the Ultimate Cup like list. If you go here, you can basically like see the modified rule set, and you can see Deathslingers here. And so the question is like, why would Bandai Bandai already hit the Mill Impmon, and they were clearly still very afraid of Deathslinger because of the extra memory that deck gets, and the fact that it's a very like versatile card where it's very, very cheap. It's good in your deck, it's good in your hand, it's good to stack it, it's good like as a security bomb. And so I think there's a world where like Bandai are kind of just like cleaning up what they've started, and they just kind of hit Deathslinger.
Deathslinger also ended up kind of like the thing that's interesting about Slinger compared to the rest of the Beelzemon pieces is while it was reprinted in the starter deck, this card is old. They really thought that this was like the kind of necessary budget to like support this archetype in EX2. It was like shoutouts to the guys who were brave enough to play purple hybrid Beelzemon top end. That like that's what they used to play.
Yep.
So this card has now lived to look at that. It says 01 on the top of that card.
Yeah.
It came out in the second year of this card game's life. We're now going into 03 for the block, and it by default, it's amazing. And now it has lived long enough that it threatens the like level 4s that people like to blast evolve on.
Yep.
So like every time this card survives a new format, it takes on a new weird bullying role for like even like you said before, like there's no bad place for it to be, and it gets better at every job it has.
Even if you've seen like online, even like people are picking up Beelzemon again just because it kind of it abuses the fact that if a Pokemon is one of the best decks and it mills you, then having another deck mill for you, it makes your deck better. So people are kind of like picking up Beelzemon as a counter to a Pokemon because, yeah, sure, go ahead and mill me. I have 8 Hammer Sparks in my deck if you mill me, and my deck has Inevitability, so it doesn't matter that like you're trying to deck me out. Well, I just kill you before that happens.
Yeah, in an optimized scenario, the Beelzemon deck basically always goes for game on the turn before they would die, and then it's just GG's.
It's just GG's. And so then we could talk about how if Bandai wants to hit Deathslinger, could they maybe bring back the Mill Impmon, so then that way like the deck kind of gets to its win condition but doesn't have like a disgusting amount of extension and like defensive cards. It just mills very well, and it wants to try win on a turn that like it's not exactly a BT9 deck, but it's very much like I have this one turn where I need to win, and then if my opponent is able to somehow beat that turn or stop me from getting there, that might make the matchup a bit more dynamic. But they could also just keep the Mill Impmon limited and also limit Deathslinger. Beelzemon is not strapped for bad cards. Like there are plenty of cards that you could add to. Like you could replace Deathslinger with Wisdom trainings or the purple trainings, and the deck would still be pretty playable.
this is a really good not to like totally segue this, but this is a really great example of one of those moments where the fact that we're finally getting trainings legal in the West is going to make a big deal here.
Oh yeah, we can
Because
definitely talk about trainings. I think I have
yeah,
like the poster here.
yeah, perfect. So purple trainings do KB's kind of brought this up before, but it's like there are a lot of factors to why some of these cards might warrant being discussed.
Oh yeah.
But Beelzemon is one of the 4 of purple wisdom training cards.
Yep.
As a deck, it loves it because it does a lot of its most valuable work while it's climbing a stack. Like it is sort of to almost a fault by its own design. It is a stack deck that has to promote an Impmon, then go up, up, up until it gets to Ballmon. So like 1 wisdom training represents
it's so much.
You know, yeah, if it hits an Ion Mako and it's an Ion Mako you didn't mill, and then it saves you the 2 memory when you go back into Ballmon later, it's incredible.
It's a very efficient card.
Yeah, so this card sees success regardless because the trainings are just absolutely wild broken. But they are in Beelzemon like even more crazy. And this is like sort of the things you said. Like Beelzemon's not strapped for good cards.
They have losing
they have
Deathslinger.
An archetypal mem setter that can help them get into a game ender.
Yeah,
they just don't. They don't run the mem setter
because they don't need to.
They have infinite free memory
so,
through their deck.
I don't think them hitting Deathslinger would like stop Beelzemon from being a good deck. It was just kind of.
It would take the most. This is a prime example of one of those cards where it's like this is damaging for future space.
Yeah, future space.
They'll never be able to print like anytime that they want to include more
like cards that do something when they're milled. Yeah.
This card is the boogeyman, and it's also like we mentioned earlier, like it's good in hand, it's good in security,
it's good everywhere,
and it is so good now that the AX cards are coming out. Like beating the level 4s on the board is just ridiculous.
All right, Greymon Virus X Antibody. This card, I think, it needs to go for a similar reason why like HPD needs to go.
Yep.
So when you look at like a Greymon deck, the Greymon decks I think are somewhat like important to the game because somebody who knows about Digimon, they know about Agumon, and they can buy the Agumon deck, and it's important to have sort of like the Charizard of the game be somewhat viable.
Shout out to Taste of Victory for his video on that.
Oh yeah, shout out to that video is great.
Seen that video rules. Really
and great, so the problem with this card is that it gives a deck that's normally like pretty fair and somewhat like expressive and like usually has like this like I have this toolbox and I can like it's a deck that's very fun to deck build because
it is the deck builder deck for BT14. I genuinely
just in general, like even in 13, like the lists I have done well were lists that like built for specific like formats or like meta calls, right?
Yeah, if you got the meta call for your event and you can properly build the Greymon toolbox to do it, that's when it gets its top cuts.
However,
it's really cool.
It's very not cool when the deck also just like randomly outpaces you and outtempos you, and then it doesn't matter what you do because this card is too good. In fact, it was so good in Greymon decks that even Shine was playing it.
Yeah, we had this before we started recording, but there was like a disgusting window where like before this card got restricted in Japan, like they just did not play Geogreymon.
Why would you?
Because why would you when you can use this on top of Greymon, get protection, which is like that's the thing that people talk about when they discuss Shine today. It's like, oh, does Shine need to get hit? It does. Like, granted, it falls off really hard in EX5.
Oh yeah,
it falls off really hard in EX5.
If we're hitting Shine because it's the bet. It's probably the best it's going to be in 14 because of the like trainings. But like it kind of falls off, right? So it's
when people talk about Shine, it's like that part of the things they discuss about it, and like one of the things that led to it falling off is that it's really fragile. Like it does kill you, but like there's no protection on that big stack they have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So this gave them protection. This gave them the then further reduced evolutions into Rise.
It gives you even more ramp.
Yeah, and then we started talking about like BT13 Rises, where you'd go into this thing, a Rise from this card, and then you'd still get your Marcus.
Yep.
So there were no points where this card had ever done something that wasn't just egregious and that's like maybe one of the other things that like we kind of talked about at the Analog Youth. It's out of color thematic. Ramp and like acceleration is not Red and Black's thing. It's not even Greymon's thing.
They wanted you to sort of like be able to go into the War Greymon from. Sorry, no, this was in BT11. They wanted you to sort of like get because the Metal Greymons, right? Like they didn't really.
BT8 Metal Greymon. This was that guy. There was like, that's make him cost 2, and let's see if you can keep turn if you commit to the Black War Greymon build.
Yeah, and it was sort of like this idea of like speeding up the control deck because Bandai, I think, were afraid that like the control deck would be a bit too slow and would get outpaced.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think if you also remember, this was their answer to Melga.
yeah,
It was
exactly.
like, that was like this black deck that is fast will also kill the unsuspending blue deck, and that
Yep,
was like the idea.
that was the idea. And so I think we're in the card game. We're past the point of letting this card like ruin games, and I think we should
It's
just
gotta go.
it's gotta go,
So
especially
toxic.
because Agumon is also getting like a ton of new support, like being
Mhm.
able to digivolve into a Greymon for free,
For
and then like
nothing, and then
yeah,
into this for nothing.
into this
Yeah,
for nothing, and then further reduce it, like adds unnecessary. Like if you wanted the deck to have a tiny bit of ramp, the rookie is fine, but you shouldn't be able to like go into your level fives practically nothing.
yep, that's totally on them.
Yep. So let's talk about Mirage and the deck that sort of wasn't that people thought it was going to pop off in 13, but again, I think not having the trainings and it completely changing our BT13 format is fine. I think it's okay to have different formats to Japan, but
Yep.
now we're getting to the point where this deck is going to be the same as Japan. And so what do you do about it, right?
Yeah. Also, arguably better if this band, like, I would love to see Mirage get hit, but of the cards we've reviewed so far,
If
I
those
wouldn't
get
say
hit,
like, yeah, I wouldn't say it's descending order in terms of like Marcus was. I do think personally Marcus is the most likely to get hit, but I do not think it's Marcus, HPD, Analog Youth, that kind of deal. If Thomas doesn't get hit, I think Mirage, or excuse me, a piece that supports Mirage doesn't get hit. I think Mirage stands to be at the low end a top 3 deck in BT14.
I agree. I think it's
potentially best deck in format if Lugomon doesn't land.
And if Marcus also gets hit.
Yeah, Marcus gets hit too.
And I think that it's fine to have like a blue and suspend deck as the best deck in the format. We've had Melga. Melga had protection through combat. Mirage has basically no protection. It will get jamming.
Yeah, it will get jamming.
It will get jamming, but it's still prone to like options insecure, which I think is something like Bandai is okay with. Is like, okay, you can theoretically beat the OTK decks by playing options. I don't think the deck is stupidly fast, but I think it's like the inevitability factor is basically unless there's an option, it doesn't matter like what you do. Like the deck can bounce stuff, the deck gains memory, the deck has unsuspends, the deck forces draws, the deck takes away your hand.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like if it was just another Melga, would let people like to kind of liken it to that, and like blue unsuspended OTK is now getting there as like we get one once a year. It does its thing. And
it does its thing.
But
this does more.
This does more. This does a different kind of thing. This is like we used to kind of joke when the BT11 support was released. They're like, oh my god, they're building bad blue Gallantmon. Because it like also has weird like good board control of like the
like in BT12, yeah.
And so when those cards
11 they first came out in 11
the Nikolai package was like Nikolai was like bad blue Takata, and so there was like all this element to it that's like, oh, you know, it also, but so while it's OTKing you, it is also removing your unprotected blockers.
Yep.
It's also removing now in BT14 the level 4 you're trying to blast evolve on.
And it also burns security, by the way.
And it burns security, yeah. Which like don't get love.
I mean, yes, of course, burning security is great, but the blue deck shouldn't burn security.
But yes, it's very sort of like that they included that randomly, and people like to talk about like when BT14 came out, there was this real conception that I think was really interesting across like a lot of the Eastern players that I followed, which was like, why is Bukamon the nail that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Because they don't have to play Nikolai.
Because Nikolai existed before. This deck has already had access to jamming. It's like, no,
you don't have to play
it for free.
Like the Bukamon is like
reason. Yeah, and then sure you lose the Wanyamon card draw, but you have
it doesn't matter.
So who cares?
It doesn't matter. And I think this is also the other. I think hitting this Thomas, I think, does the most while hurting the deck the least, because this, sure, like the 8 cards in hand to unsuspend, like while they have to play this guy down to 3. This guy's fine to play in the early game. He just draws your card, goes even. He's more checks later on, and also the mem setter, while it adds a card to your hand, it plays into the whole like because you added a card, it procs your effects, which is I think
this one of the things you like. This does that's interesting is it's not just that it's good later on, it's good early randomly. Like, there's this 1 or 2 turn window when you play Mirage where it's like because the wording on Bukamon is if there are no other Digimon, if your opponent controls no Digimon with more sources, i.e., an empty board, then the level 4s have jamming. So
Yeah.
this promise, while you've got the cards in hand and the level 4, represents a level 4 that swings twice with jamming, which is not. It's like very antithetical to the OTK thing they were going for.
Yeah, this card does a lot, and also because of Zudamon Ace, I think it also.
Oh yeah, Zudamon is so good.
Zudamon is like the Mirage deck. It had a very strong like core, but it was sort of like it was good at doing its thing, but like now it can use generic tools, so it kind of just does everything.
Yep.
In a way,
totally.
It has the consistency, it has the disruption, it has the OTK potential, and I think like hitting Thomas is like the way to sort of like slow it down a little bit while letting it either play it like a slower paced game a little bit, sort of like you can control the board and you can like tax me and stuff, but at least like I have the ability to fight back, and especially if there's a Zudamon Ace in that stack, if there's a removal option, well, you're gonna get overflowed, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting.
It's cool. Very quickly, Digimon. I think Hunters as a deck, it came out in BT12. The deck is very cheap. The deck does pretty well. I think people don't play the deck because the deck is boring. Not boring, but the deck is very like samey. It's very like.
It's also kind of bordering on solved.
Which, yes, the deck is pretty much solved.
We've had a few releases now that have not really shaken
it. You change maybe like 2 cards per format. But like, do I want more jamming or do I want more popping? But like, 47 of your cards are about the same. And I think this is one of those kind of like similar to Cross Art where like it's okay to have these decks, but the deck also has a unique form of removal that the game is sort of not like ready for. Maybe like Alphamon is like the only card that kind of stops your removal.
And I think it's fascinating that like they managed to print a deck that is so tamer dependent that Machinedramon with its anti-tamer pieces it can't deal with it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna go to bat for Machinedramon, but like it is fascinating that a lot of the best removal for the kind of like uninteractive gameplay of Hunters, like just continuing to advantage generate forever, is also a thing that Hunters itself beats. So like there are it kind of has shades of like it has lived a little while now. It's getting older in Japan.
It's also getting like a promo.
Yeah, it has a promo that we are probably. I think was that one of the ones that were confirmed.
Yes, I think we're getting the Prism whatever.
Prism Garrett doesn't see play in Japan though. That's the other thing. It's like because again the deck's core is kind of there.
It's kind of there. I think it's mostly I would want to see Hunters go because Hunters tends to also be sort of like the dog on the leash for other decks because if your deck does, it was like that in BT12 where like you either lose to Beelzemon and Beelzemon beats everything, and so Beelzemon gets to be the best deck because anything that would theoretically beat Beelzemon, Hunters beats that. And it's kind of like similar again in 13 where like the deck is still crazy. The deck is incredibly solid for tournaments. The deck has tons of removal. The deck also has incredible kill potential. It has.
We're not saying it has no counters.
What's up?
It's fantastic, but it's not like a bulletproof abomination, right? Like it is. It isn't a tier 0 monster, but the things it does keep it around in ways that like. Past decks that have been hit on ban lists also did.
Yeah.
This just has like a fun little caveat that it was also they had to have the hard once per turn for superior mode because like the deck has so many things that it does in ways that are like effective like that eventually they're probably gonna have to look at it for what it is and be like, okay, it crowds things out.
And so like when you're looking at like hitting the deck, you can't really take away its consistency because like a lot of your power budget is on superior mode, and you can't really take out your tamer acceleration because otherwise the deck is like actually too slow, and the draw engines and like the watchmakers, like the watchmaker you could technically look at it, but then it hurts your ability to deal with level 7s. Yes, it hurts the flavor. So I think like Digimon just like because it randomly gives you rush, it means that like the deck doesn't have to be a stack deck. It just shows up and clears your stack and then kills you. I think this is like the most reasonable card to hit.
I think this is maybe a good chance for us to talk about one of the things we discussed when we were talking about making this video, which is that it's like a lot of the times things get hit for 3 reasons. It's that they've been around too long, they are restricting design space like we've talked about a little bit ahead of time, and that they do something unfair. The thing that deck used to do that was unfair was the 2-turn unspend infinitely in OTK because it was not a hard once per turn.
Oh yeah, before we got the ruling change,
Now
the West didn't have to experience that. That was very much like a Japan Asia thing.
Yeah, see you later. The thing that this deck does now that I think people would consider the most unfair is either the Arrestor Dramon giving it Rush out of nowhere because it can protect its resources forever, or a card that we intentionally did not put on here because I don't think it's the right time for it, which is Quartzmon.
Oh, Quartzmon.
Yeah, and when we talk about cards that like serve functions on ban lists, it's that like they've been around too long, or they do something that's unfair, or again, in the case of Bandai, the Quartzmon's at SR, so we don't think they're gonna hit it. Yeah,
no,
it's too much of an established power budget at the moment.
They're going to be hitting promos, and promos are equivalent to SRs in terms of power, but promos, Bandai looks at it as a promo as like a card that you earn as opposed to a card that you buy.
Yeah.
So, like, you get promos by going to locals, but SRs you have to buy, right? And Bandai wants to protect its investment, so...
And they're also much more likely to replace your... is the Arrestor Dramon an uncommon?
Yes, it's an uncommon.
They're much more likely... they're much more likely to give Gumdramon and Arrestor Dramon a new piece down the line if this ever gets hit than they are to replace Quartzmon.
So, I think, like, it's basic... I don't think you need to hit Hunters, but if you did, this is something that you could look at.
And one of the reasons we even mentioned it here is because of the, it's been out for, when did BT12 drop in Japan? It's old now.
Yeah, the deck is like pretty old.
It's been about a year.
It definitely phases out the more like we go. The deck, its longevity is like, I think it's also souring our perception of the deck a little bit because 13 for us was so long and there was not that many tournaments that weren't like in-person tournaments. There was like a good amount, but 13 was just a very long format, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Blazing Memory Wrist. This card plus is too much.
It's really good.
I think that's my only beef with the card. It plus is too much.
This is another one of those ones where we were talking about before we were starting.
We don't even have to spend that much time on this card.
Yeah, it's insane. It's a really weird card because it's like it's also kind of like why they hit Reinforce, which is it's just too much, and it
too much.
So much of this stuff. Like they just printed Blue Training, but like Blue Flare don't care.
No,
they've got
why would you? You have this is better. On average, you stay the memory that you pay, the 5 memory that you paid for, you get back. It pluses 3 if you hit the Tamer, and insecurity it's just a boost.
Yeah, Blue Flare is fascinating because it's also like it's like a study of like the theory of Digimon deck building. Is like, if you pass 5 on the first turn, some decks don't really have a great answer to that because they haven't accumulated the resources. Even in a format with training like Japan had in BT13 and going on, where you do have great ways to spend memory quickly, Blue Flare still plays this.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna play a searcher. You're gonna play 2 searchers. Then what? You're playing into my win card.
Play into them.
This card needs to go.
A lot. It's really toxic.
No, I think.
Can I talk about Ignitemon for a second? I know we're trying to move through some of these, but
okay. No, I think this is now where we can I guess talk about Cool Boy as like the introduction to. I think so. If you look here on screen, these are basically cards that like we are looking at them from very much like a not so much what they've done in the past, but like what they will also be able to do, similar to like Analog Youth, right?
Yeah.
Ignite. On paper, this card looks okay.
It's just a good quality purple rookie.
It's a good
individually valuable piece of many purple decks.
The problem is that this card actually is going to end up doing too much.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to hit SRs and you don't want to hit cards that just came out, you have to start looking at the bottom end. Right? And I think this is the card that like does too much for what like EX5 wants to bring to the table. Like if the ban list, well we did say that like this was just a tier list for 14. If this ban list that we're theory crafting or we're discussing is also meant to sort of like keep EX5 like in check, right? Then you need to start
protect the NA format for nationals and stuff.
We were looking at some of these cards for us in Europe, but we also need to look at these cards for NA.
And that's to get the context of this. A lot of people have probably been hearing about Anubis in Japan and how good it is. But the Anubis deck is probably getting called what it is because it has dope art and everybody likes Anubismon. But it most fairly, I think, it would probably be a purple shaman deck.
Yes.
And the thing that it does is Anubis massively reduces the play cost of the next thing you're going to do in the tribal tag in the restrictions, which then allows you to go into Digicrossing Mervamon.
Yep. Because you're still playing.
Yep. And so the Mervamon is arguably the most broken part of the piece because it is like if you were going to take the deck and take it apart, Mervamon would be the card to hit. But again, it doesn't really.
Merva is one of those cards. Yeah, Merva is one that starts to get you off here, but Merva is very quickly one of those cards that like it should get hit because it's an SR, because when you're looking in the past between like the loop decks and the cross art deck and now this, the
Yeah.
card is the
Oh,
problem, but we can't hit SRs, right? If we're hitting things according to Bandai, we can't hit SRs.
yeah, I already spent my 20 Great British Pounds on my altar. I don't want to lose my card.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
Ignite.
Yeah, Ignite Mon is kind of the substitute for that. With also kind of the benefit of that it is we
Removal.
meant it is removal and it is just also individually a very high quality thing. Shoutouts to the nasty Yadagarasu Lock EX5 Grace Nova that plays this at 4 and uses it to skip turns. It's
Yep.
degenerate.
Also,
So this are pieces to this card that just shouldn't probably.
the other problem with Ignite is I think the card, it doesn't really have a bad place to be, because if it's in your
Yeah.
hand, you use it in your stack or you ditch it. If it's in your stack, well, you're gaining the memory. If it's in your trash and you discard, you bring it back, and now you have like removal. It's great on field. In security, the card is fine because like, oh cool, it was my first check. Now I just have the Ignite. If you mill it, like I don't know if that deck really mills, but because you're
Yeah,
drawing and you're discarding it, effectively like you're going through your entire deck. And also because it's a crosshair card, it gains all the benefits from Merva.
Mm-hmm.
So the card just ends up doing a little bit too much. And I think the short and simple is Merva and SR, we can't hit Merva, so we have to hit Ignite because it's the next.
Yeah,
like
this is another one of those we can't hit the card we'd love to hit, but this will do. I suppose.
Yeah, and I think like EX, we don't have to hit every single deck ever, but there's
No, EX5 looks exciting in of its own right, but like because
it's very similar to 13, where like it's a diverse in a format.
Yep.
But one color is like more prominent than the other, and so we have to start looking at like what that color has that the other colors don't have.
I think Ignite Mon gets a kind of interesting thing where in, let's call it 6 months between now and the next ban list.
Yeah.
I think you and I are going to be feeling pretty smart about what we said here about Ignite Mon, because after people play, we learned today, as of today's recording,
Yep.
that Saberdramon, the promo, I think it's promo like 100 something.
Yes. Do I have that on Twitter?
It might be on probably be in like one of the folders if you go to the anniversary packs on the.
Okay, I don't have it on me right now. But...
Oh yeah, you'll have it. It's on the tab, with like the product info.
What here?
Yeah, it'll be. I think it's like below that, or like near here.
I think it's the EX5. I think it's confirmation for EX5. It's not for BT14.
Okay, then I'm mixing up my packs. Oh, I was thinking the anniversary cards. You're
yeah.
Right, yeah. Anyway,
Saberdramon promo.
So we're going to be receiving the Anubis Shaman box at essentially full power, where a lot of these decks that are going to get hit, like if they hit Luga or if they hit Shine or they hit Moron, they were the things that were preventing it being kind of singularly tier 0 in EX5. And I think, like, if this dodges the ban list and Merva dodges the ban list, like, we're looking at a really crazy good Anubis deck.
It's pretty good. The only issue with Anubis is that it loses to, like, Floodgates, but it also plays its own Floodgates.
Yep.
And so, like, it's either you outspeed it or you lose to it, and it's very hard to outspeed it.
Yeah, I love the adaptation where, like, previously people were like, oh, it loses to Leviamon, and then people started playing the Gatomon.
Yep. Yep. The Gatomon Uzor.
Gatomon Ulver.
Yeah.
It removes the Leviamons.
It's neat. So, TK. Yellow is cringe when it's heals. When all they do is healing, yellow is cringe. And TK is a card that, because of the new support, I think it's time for TK to go.
This is the card, like, this is maybe a whole ban list. And I'm sure, because we've taken a while to get to this, I'm sure people have been really mad about this in the comments. This is the card that would be the most not on this list if we could choose BT14 cards. Because TK is here because of Messenger of Hope. Because all of those cards require TK by name, and it's like him, the new good one from BT14, and like TK Kari.
Yeah.
There are fewer choices. So it's like something with the name TK would need to be removed on the 17th of November 2023 for them to feel like they have power neutral that. And I don't think they will, but it's something to consider.
And I understand that, like, yellow being able to, like, manipulate your security and check what's there and use it as a second hand is fine, but the new yellow stuff that's coming out, it's very, like, one-sided. Like, I think yellow is at its best when it's using its security as a resource, but which is, like, why I like the evolution stuff, because you're evolving from your security. But when all you're doing is, like, taking options or like taking cards and loading options by, like, randomly recovering,
Yeah, or
And,
the way that Messenger ended up getting used, which was like
yeah,
Patamon evolves for free,
yeah,
goes into
and
Geogray finds a thing, you Messenger for free, you find another thing. It was just, it became
too
like
much,
a way to remove Digimon from your security,
and
which is
just
the
load
thing
it
that
with.
like, yeah, which Yellow Control wants. And like, there's no shortage of people that have talked about like how close Venus Lock is to being that good.
I think Venus
This
is
is one of
fine
those.
because Venus at least like progresses the game in a way. Like Venus has to evolve and Venus has to get on
Yes.
board. Whereas like
When Venus doesn't pay for its digivolving, that's where it gets
that's
pretty
pretty
weird.
problematic.
Yeah, so like Messenger again, like this card is here because Messenger isn't. But if Messenger was here, that's what we would pick.
And I think like the other thing is very quickly, I think a lot of people yellow has the potential to be like a cool color, but when
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
yellow like
Bushi Agumon. Yes. Lord Nightmon. Well,
uh,
we'll get
yeah,
there. But Kintaris is cool.
yeah, that's my thing. Yellow has a lot of cool decks, but people are afraid of like experimenting because all they've known for the longest time is recover +1, right?
That's Yellow Hybrid's fault.
Yeah, that
Like
yellow hybrid.
we spent way too long playing in a format where Yellow was allowed to be that passive
Yep.
and that uninteractive.
Cool boy.
He's gotta go, man.
He's gotta go.
There's nothing else to
There's
say. He's done his time.
he was like incredibly problematic, went under the radar, still a very good card, and now he's coming back in full force. With
It's like yeah, the argument that he isn't necessary in the modern X antibody stuff is more of an indictment of the X antibody cards and not Cool Boy. But if they're good and that build is good, Cool Boy is always going to be around. And he costs too little and he gives too much. It's just ridiculous.
incredibly strong in multiples. It just skews your tempo.
Yeah. This is an interesting question I was going to ask you because when people talk about Cool Boy, one of the things we used to hear a lot back in like EX3 here in the West was that like Cool Boy didn't need a hit, he needed an errata, and he needed to cost. Do you think Cool Boy still would be okay? Like, have we gone back around where it's like,
no,
if Cool Boy cost 4, would he be fair?
Oh, 4 maybe. I think 3 no, 4 maybe, but because like 4 at least passes the turn most of the time. The problem is that like when you play like Cool Boy back to back and you don't like to pass the turn.
Yeah, 2 Cool Boys to pass the turn is so evil.
Like your opponent plays a Mem Tamer, puts you to 3, and then you go like Cool Boy. Yeah. Well, technically that's actually not that efficient, but that's not the point. The point is that like being able to play multiple Cool Boys is not great, and in security the card
you're able to pass the turn back while generating like your next turn is going to
be unreal. It's the design like the design on this card is kind of like I like that they're doing tamers that are searchers now. I think that's fine, but like when you look at Mimi, I think the new BT14 Mimi is that card that like in a little while we'll look at it and go, this card maybe wasn't,
Yeah, same with the 15 map.
Yeah, cards that like tamers that like search and gain a memory.
They're like people like to joke that they're like memory boosts every turn.
Yeah, I think those cards are not the most like well designed, but Cool Boy kind of like kickstarted it all right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting into like the last bit of like the balance discussion here, and we're basically now going. This is exclusively for like EX5.
Future design. These are the bands that basically are exclusively because of what did like we said, Bandai has talked about. They restrict future designs,
and also just like the upcoming formats. Scatter mode needs to go, and I think I understand that a lot of people like scatter mode. Like, haha, it has jamming, and it's a classic card, right? Like if you think about BT7 being a retro format, the good old days. It's a very nostalgic card for a lot of people, and like on paper the card doesn't look that broken because it's you on the leash and draw and trash, but this card kind of like single-handedly has carried a lot of purple decks that deserve to have like their own good support. And there's something to be said about like Digimon and how like generic cards still have a place in the metagame. Like not everything has to be archetypal. And purple is like a good example of that, where like a lot of the purple decks are just like draw, discard, and free play and blah blah blah.
Yep.
But scatter mode is now like the third time that it shows up. It was great in BT7. It's currently like really good. Well, it was really good in like loop decks back in like BT12,
BT8, BT9.
Yeah, like the second coming of like the loop decks with Minerva and stuff.
Yeah, and then now it has like
Belphamon as well.
Belphamon, yeah, BT13 Belphamon, the card lives this card.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know where this goes.
We know where this is going.
And this is like one of those, you see a lot of people talking about like, oh, wouldn't this have been an interesting angle for them to have given us like choice restrictions? Like in lieu of that never happening, and that we're probably not going to see choice restriction where like you can't play X thing with scatter mode, or And like even Little Demi Miramon is kind of in this discussion too. Like the generic power of some of these purple cards have led to things just getting out of hand. It's like, yeah, Apocalypse is currently the guy we like to talk about as broken thing, but it's like fourth time's the charm, right? They'll
Right.
maybe figure it out after a while.
And like when you look at like the cards that we've discussed a decent amount of purple decks, and that's just because like purple, when it's good, it feels like the best when it is
Yeah,
good. Like,
and we know what's coming too. Like,
yeah, we know a lot of it. Yeah,
EX5.
but purple didn't have like that many hits. Purple had, so if we go on the restriction, they have like what, calling hit, and
Calling and Eismon.
calling and Eismon. Yeah, the regular Eismon. And this card is another like example why I don't think it's okay to have this with the existence of Eismon, because
Yeah, we'd be complaining about that if it wasn't already at 1, and even that's still sacky.
It adds high roll to your deck. Like when the scatter mode like dies and plays an Eismon, and you play like Astamon, even in current format, like you play that Astamon for whatever amount of memory, and you now have the free body to pop, and then like they just buff them on turn to sleep on turn 2. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And so I think it's time for Eismon to go. And this is finally the final card here is like a card that I don't know. This is a weird one. I think this card would actually make EX5 like a really fun format.
If it was banned, you mean?
If it was banned, yeah.
Yes. Is this card acceptable at 1, or does it have to go?
At 1, it's like sacky, but like, At 0, I don't know. I think printing a floodgate like this for this purple should have like the floodgates that purple have. They have like Gazimon and they have like Psychmon, which are both like extremely playable.
They're very good. The mem blocker plus a play cost reduction ignoring is like the combination of those two has proven very effective.
And so
green has that, right? That's the green is the other color with the exact same.
Yeah, we have the exact same. But the problem with green is that like we don't have graveyard recursion, where like we need to see if you out the first one, we then have to draw into the second, the third, the fourth. Whereas in purple, they draw through their entire deck, so they can just keep free playing the same like floodgate over and over again. And it becomes a problem when the purple decks are playing Psychmons to counter each other, because then it becomes a question of like who's more broken, like who's more degenerate. You have
and the dual-sided part of this creates this like weird game state where it's like whoever gets to set up first and whoever did the faster high roll here just closes the game on the way.
Yeah, if we're playing the Anubis Mirror and I go first, do my thing, and then end with Psychmon. Now, unless you show me an out to the Psychmon, you can't get back into the game. Or it's
that increases each time you need to deal with the Psychmons, because every Psychmon that goes to trash is more recursion.
Even if we wanted to like look at like Japanese format like BT15, people are playing the BT1 or BT2 Piedmon because it plays 2 Psychmons. So then you need double removal. And
just to out the next Apocalypse.
Yeah, they're willing to pass you like 6, 7, 8 memory just to stop you from getting to that card. But that, again, that's my thing. I think like Psychmon, if it wasn't in purple, because you see like Solarmon and Chikrumon, and you're not complaining about it.
If this was a black floodgate, we would not be having it.
Which it is.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
With Chikrumon, right? And Solarmon, like black and red have these floodgates, but they can't spam them in multiples every single turn that if they wanted to. Like
without it being tribal, God forbid.
Yeah. So I think like finally here wrapping up like the individual cards, I think like Psychmon is, I know a lot of people are going to be called crazy and be like, purple then has no defensive cards and this and that, but like
purple's got some defense.
Purple definitely has some defense.
I don't think people are going to say that.
Purple has, right.
This is unprecedented, right? Like nobody's ever really talked about the place of these floodgates.
I'm sure people have talked about it, but I kind of
within the context of this kind of ban list.
Yes, for the current upcoming ban list, right? So, really quickly,
you want to wrap up a little bit with like your pick on like the most likelies or least likelies?
Oh, sure, we can do that. I also have like a couple of like things that I want to kind of go through. So it's like, okay, we can do the likelies and the unlikelies. I don't think they'll hit Blazing Memory Beast. I don't think they'll hit Arrestor. I don't think they'll hit
TK.
I don't think they'll hit TK. I don't think they'll hit Psychmon.
I don't think they'll hit Deathslinger and HPD.
I think they'll hit HPD. They won't hit Deathslinger.
Really? They're both on the same ban list for Ulti Cup.
Well, because Beelzemon didn't perform in Ulti Cup.
Ah, yeah. Okay, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good point. Beelzemon did fall off really hard.
So they're
But it's
like,
already got Hitmon on the ban list, so what came
yeah.
first?
And so I don't think they'll hit Thomas.
Yeah, he does stand to be the guy.
I kind of see them hitting Ignite as like,
This sounds silly, so get ready. I think Ignite is less likely than the rest of these cards because he got an event pack reprint.
oh sure, yeah, the event pack
Yeah.
reprint.
So that's not normally an indication,
Mm,
but like
we can
sometimes
keep the
they've done
scatter
that.
mode, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a safer bet.
Like if they hit these, like would
Oh
Digimon
my god,
be?
if they hit 6 cards and it's this 6, I feel amazing about Digimon.
It
Like
would be
I
pretty
will be
good.
pretty yeah, I will feel pretty frustrated to be dealing with Messenger and with with like Yellow Good Stuff plus Mirage. Like BT14 for European nationals will be a
Mm-hmm.
little frustrating. But like it does overall put the game in a much healthier state.
Mm-hmm. I think Bandai just needs to not be afraid to kind of like reset the game a bit.
Oh my
Like
god, please just take the 1-ups out.
if we're going into like a new era of the game, like let's make sure that it's like fresh. Like do a Yu-Gi-Oh like, and then like we can talk about like
Yeah.
cards that like people talk about like they're doing
Come back.
unrestricted. This can come back. This can come back. Well, the problem is like this adds even more high roll to Jesmon.
Yeah, I just don't like people talk about like Savior Huckmon wouldn't come back,
We
but I
don't even
worry
have to
that like
discuss this. Like there's no
yeah,
point
there's
discussing
no
this.
world Eismon comes back. But like Savior Huck is like, why would you print something that was frustrating in the past when you want more Jesmon cards down the line?
Yeah,
This card just restricts what they can make.
Jesmon is fine. Is a fine deck. Jesmon is a
Like
tempo deck where like it needs
yeah,
time to
build a
set up.
board, break a board is really unique and interesting for Jesmon. Let it
It's
have
great.
it play.
Let Jesmon do removal. This card at 1 it needs to be at 0.
Saki, this is kind of Saki.
These
This
are
is the
like
less Saki version, but it's still
because
kind of
at least they're not tagged, but with trainings and boosts you find them just as often.
That's
So like there's an argument to make that like the Argos could go, like all of the 0 cost Digizorb should go. Like 1 cost level 5 is fine because like that's all it does. Still very powerful, but yeah,
but yeah, the
I
zeros
saw it's just very
yeah,
unfun.
he's out. Reinforce can go. This
Very
card is terrible.
unfun. Magnetar Infusion, not great.
Yeah,
Criminal,
Sami,
no.
criminal, no.
Um,
No. I.
uh,
It's one of those ones where it's like
It's like-
I
would
think
it bring
the
it? Would
existing-
Crossbar be immediately back with Shoutmon?
Crossheart the Crossheart stands would not love it, but I actually think this card would be one of the most like it has an end of attack pop itself, right? Like,
Sure.
That's the crazy.
The problem is that like
But,
it
like-
makes it so that like you don't need multiple Digicross Tamers to
Yes, exactly. And then it also represents like technically they've
infinite
printed
card
more-
draw.
Yeah, they've technically printed more valuable tools to answer this sort of stuff. Zudomon Ace is an incredibly effective
Oh yeah,
tool to
absolutely.
fight this thing, but it's like why open the door back up? It's also a level 4 red
Yeah,
and yellow, so like there is a world where like this is a thing people blast evolve on.
yeah.
I wonder maybe if level 4 has become like a thing that they have to be careful with.
Oh
when they
yeah,
build
because
these
of
cards.
like the level
Yeah.
5s.
And God, Magna Angemon is a good one.
Yeah, that's
Magna
good.
Angemon Ace is incredibly good.
So I mean, like,
Yeah,
could
I
this
wouldn't-
come back? Like,
it's my so far it's the one I think would be the least broken to come back.
this card absolutely not.
Never, yeah, no.
Like-
Especially the reprinted trainings.
The
Like,
reprinted
this thing-
trainings, and so like Alphamon will, like theoretically, Alphamon is more consistent than ever.
Yeah,
I
this
think
would be
Japan
the card.
just forgot.
Yeah, this would be the card that would do the thing that is like the nightmare to everyone that just can never get over BT9, which
Yeah.
is that like it would have both trainings to make it cheap and Cool Boy to
Yeah.
generate the memory. And
Not
it would be-
great.
It can never come back.
Uh,
Sunrise Buster should go. Well, then
it's-
it was broken when the Marcuses weren't real, and now the Marcus.
the markets are real. It's even more stupid.
Yeah. Very dumb.
Nope.
No. Can't
Yeah,
come back.
like I don't really want to entertain calling because
Calling it 4, they wouldn't play 4, but if they could play 2, it would be too good.
yeah,
Calling honestly should be gone.
yeah, it just does a little bit too much. Like it pluses too much. It procs your things that you want to proc anyway.
Calling an EX5,
It doesn't cost anything. Yeah, in EX5,
recursion for your 2 Psychmons.
yeah, it's not great.
Forget calling.
Too fast for a
The
deck that
zero.
doesn't need to have speed.
Yeah.
And then like unfun OTK.
Unfun OTK.
Yeah.
I do like bugs, but unfun
Yeah,
OTK.
I think okay. Cyber Sleuth set we can
Yeah,
we'll get there. Right? Bugs
One
will
day.
get there.
one day, bro.
This is
One
a
day.
good step in the right direction. We're done with plants for a little bit. Well, we said we were done with plants, and then we got the Rosemon X line. So
Very sick though. Very sick.
very sick, but like, please come on, like, let's keep the bugs flowing.
True.
No,
Nope. Can't
no,
come back, can't-
it just
Not till-
can't.
There's another guy they'd have. There's like 3 more cards they'd have to hit
Yeah.
before they can even jokingly look at that. Uh,
This is, I think, if they hit Slinger, I'm okay with them keeping him.
uh, I I still think I would not love. You're right. I don't think they can ever both be at 4 ever again.
No, not both.
But I still think that like we were kind of talking about this before when we were mentioning whether or not we were going to include Blazing Memory Boost on our first list,
Oh,
which is that it's like consistency cards don't tend to get the axe. Like they don't really hit searchers. They don't do a lot of this other stuff.
this is the
Like
one.
Reinforce was kind of the exception to that.
And
This card is a searcher that did too much in other things, and like
it wasn't because it was it wasn't because of the search. It was because of the.
yeah, it was because of its other stuff.
But
So
it was
maybe
because
there's an
of like
argument.
everything else. Like the deck like was pushed over the edge, right?
I will say there is another thing that makes me think they couldn't bring this back, which is the Digimon stuff has been starting to be trash
Oh,
based,
right.
and I worry that would restrict the design space of Digimon
Sure.
cards. So I personally don't think this could come back to 4.
Okay, that's fair.
But
I
again,
personally would like it just to see. Like, I think out of all the things, I know like people on Twitter will be like, "Oh, you'd like to see Impmon be back," but like, what about reinforcing memories? Yellow hasn't done anything. Like, I get that. This is like my personal like, let me mill, just let me mill.
It's more fun because the mill deck does something.
Yeah, and then like, um,
So, sorry, I don't want to play against D Reaper for the 90th time.
yeah, it's just like zero cost level 5 shouldn't really exist,
Yeah,
especially with like
awesome
Yoshino
especially
and
with the
Mimi.
tribal. Yeah, and just the fact that it's vegetation.
Yeah, it's
Future
just
design space.
Fisher design space. And so that's like pretty much it for that. So here in Ultimate Cup, we have like a couple of other things like Death X and Werewolf. These are very much like specific to that format. I think like Death X is like incredibly powerful card in the future formats. And
But they just announced it's being reprinted.
yeah, like this is like Market Watch Marcio and Market Watch Tom. Like pick up your like
Yeah.
Death X now before it like actually becomes good again.
Yep.
And so it's like they're not going to hit a secret anyway. They only hit it because it was a side format.
I would have been very surprised if they hit Death X one.
Yeah.
Like I would have definitely guessed they'd hit Merva first.
So this is like East's like quick breakdown where this is just like a data compilation of like how good the decks were as like in BT14.
The goat.
Yeah, shout outs to East. He did an interview with our if you guys don't know, KNT Elixir, he's part of like our locals in our testing group. So for those of you that don't know, I'm the guy that has the Justimon mat, and you usually use the what mat do you usually use?
I mean, when I'm on stream.
Well, you were on stream recently because you were on Red
yeah,
the Sword Champs.
on Emily's mat.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I also I've some Sinobali mats and stuff, but yeah, I got
sure.
the Red Hydrant top.
Right. But yeah, he did an interview in East.
Did an interview.
That was sick.
Stuff. Yeah. East's the man, dude. Really reps the scene. Like, there's a couple guys like who really do a lot of good for Digimon, and East is one of those.
This is one of them. But yeah,
not sub. We gotta. That number is way too low. Get the man.
I'm on my alt, but anyway.
Sub to the man. What are you
Wait,
doing?
what do you mean? What? I am sub. What?
There you go. We're
what?
in there.
No, that is my alt.
Yeah, your alt's on fine. Don't worry.
Okay, it's fine.
I won't tell East.
So for BT14, this applies mostly for our Euros. Because again, NA is going to be playing X5, Europe is going to be playing BT14. So like when you're looking at BT14, you see like Shine's incredible, despite like Fenrir Lugamon like caught up pretty quickly once people kind of like figured it out.
Yeah,
but Shine
the
was
recipe really got solved when people understood the Helugar plus analog.
Yeah, and like Shine with trainings that shows you that like a deck that was like creeping up, Shine was still king.
Yeah, Shine really also started. This is when one of the context things that's important to know for BT14 was that Shine took a little minute in Japan to adapt to the red Koromon.
Yeah.
And that red Koromon plus the red and yellow training is just kind of ridiculous.
It's got ridiculous. Wargreymon with the new support is really good. Mirage is great. Bloom is really good because of LM, which is something like here in the Funny but Doggy no LM. That's why Gamamon is solo, because like without the LM cards, the deck can't really compete. But if we had LM, well, there's an argument to make that like Gamamon would be like tier 1.5.
I feel really bad. You just know there's gonna be some dude that's like, but Examon.
But like Examon, yeah, for sure.
Like
even like in like BT14 is a great set because it adds a bunch of like good decks like Fenrir, Deeper Grade, Gamamon. They're all good, but like even East highlights that like the old decks didn't get phased out. Like that's when you know it's a good set. Like natural like power creep is better than just like forced power creep. Except when Shine handles you, that's cringe.
Shine maybe should go.
And this is like the EX5 one where you see like a lot of the decks are still good. Like you see like okay, D Brigade is not here, but I think because Japan gets bored of decks extremely quickly.
Yeah, And also, EX5 in Japan is unique in a way that it won't be for us, where EX5 was 5 weeks in Japan. That
We'll
is
have
not
it.
a very long time for the format.
We'll have it for a bit longer, right?
Yeah, we get it for it drops in the middle of January, and then BT15 pre-releases begin in the middle of February, so we get it for like 6 or 7 weeks.
Okay.
Like I think it's like 6 weeks.
Okay, it'll be like a similar amount of time, but not that much.
Yeah, but we come into it knowing.
Yeah, that's why like the leopard deck like caught a bunch of people off guard, but like now with the ruling, we know that like the leopard deck is like a little bit worse with the leopard Davis stuff with the ruling.
Yeah,
that sucks. But like,
the other thing is that like Anubis is represented here at 44 wins. It took like Anubis didn't do anything for the first 2 weeks, so 44 wins in 3 weeks is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then like Geogreymon becomes like
Geogreymon is here twice.
Shine starts to fall off here. But like
Shine's got
in BT15 it's like it's not gone, but like it's not as powerful. But like the idea of this ban list is that you don't want Shine to dominate another format, like you know? Wargreymon's still great, Davis, Belstar with like the bottom end, and some of these decks are just like enabled by the Geogreymon package, and even like Fenrir, I think it's just because Japan, again, new toy syndrome. If you invest into Lugamon with like analog at 4, you would have a great deck for the next like 3 sets.
At least, yeah. Like I said, we're likely getting another wave of support too.
Yep. And so that's like pretty much it for like EX5. So we know that BT15 is coming out in February. So basically, this ban list is a ban list meant to hold.
We anticipate it. Yeah, we anticipate this will go until probably midway through BT15.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if like the next time we get a ban list announcement, it'll be live on February 17th. Like it'll go into effect on February 17th.
Or at the very least, like before EX6 gets revealed. Like that's kind of how they did it with like when they restricted Metal Greymon.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, we'll do it like a month after the set dropped. So.
And then like so here we know that like that's the thing. It's because the format that we're going into, the training's just like these are cards that like are worth their own like video.
There could have been a whole thing about maybe these were they're not banning trainings when they're making them boxed offers.
No.
There's no way.
There's no way.
One day, maybe.
One day, the cards do a little bit too much between like this and the memory boosts.
They make the game much faster too.
The worst part is, the worst is that like these 5-year memory boosts. So if you on your first turn, if you go second and you drop like training into memory boost,
oh, so good. Dude.
It's just like it's kind of over. Not like over for your opponent, but you have so much that you're able to do.
I was testing some BT14 D Brigade. We were talking about this before we started recording.
Yeah.
I was testing some BT14 D Brigade. My opening hand was training. Training found training. I took the training. Training found memory boost. I played the memory boost. And I went, my turn 2 going second, or sorry, turn 1 going second was training, memory boost to pass turn.
That's crazy.
Disgusting.
Yeah. So yeah,
I made Brigade Ramon.
They can't really see it, but like Andrew's like
shout outs to the Elixir.
Yeah.
Dude. A lot of shout outs today.
Regional events held on will not adhere to this update, so
this is not going to be the second event, the second UK regional in a row where ban list drops right before the event. That would be
kind of stinky.
That would be a bummer.
But going back to this, I think these are like the cards that we would want to see hit the most, and I think for the people that like stuck through or closing in on like an hour and a half almost, but there's just YouTube content for Digimon. A lot of it is just like deck lists and like tamer. It's like not even like tournament mods, it's just like matches and deck lists and matches and deck lists. So I wanted to kind of do like a longer form video where we like actually talk about like, okay, something needs to happen for the game to kind of like stay healthy and to keep bringing new people in, because this is like the last chance that we really have to bring new people in. We went back to adventure, new mechanic.
Yeah. In Japan, it did great.
Yeah.
They did the numbers were really good for Digimon back then.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, if you guys have made it this far through this video, first, thank you very much. And second,
drop like a Kara emoji or something.
Well, also, no, like, I think it's interesting because we're going into this, we said this before, this is the first set released in the West with Block 3. We're really getting there with Digimon. It feels like it's really going to hold its own.
Mm-hmm.
So, we still
have a ton of media to go through.
Yeah, I would love to know if you guys want to comment. Let us know what deck you play, and if your deck was gonna get put on the ban list, what is the card that your deck has that'll go on the ban list? My beloved pet deck Gallantmon would not be allowed to keep Crimson Mode. If it was ever going on the ban list, that's what they
Oh
would
yeah, if like Gallant like was winning
yeah,
at everything,
if Gallant started popping off, they'll take Crimson Mode.
no take Crimson Mode.
But like, yeah, shout outs in the comments. Let us know what you're playing, and if
Followed
your
by a
deck was
carrot emoji. It's
busted,
very important that we do a carrot emoji for the ones
yeah,
that are real.
carrot emojis
Carrot
for my
emojis.
bright orange hat.
Mine is like brown.
Well, that's she didn't not a good carrot.
But yeah, we might do a. I kind of want to do like an actual like BT14 tier list like video if that's something like BT14 or EX5 if that's something that like you guys want to see in the comments. Let me know and we can do another one of these if people enjoy this like long form content.
Heck yeah, it's
Heck
been
yeah.
like a podcast for people.
Yeah. All right, that's it. Goodbye.